Please welcome the panel on AI's Ethical Frontier, Responsible Regulation by Whom? Moderated by CBS News Senior Business and Technology Correspondent, Ling Kent.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Familiar faces to discuss the ethical frontier. And I want to start from Capitol Hill. We've seen some discussions happen in a way that might be promising progress, but executive order from the White House. And we also know that Homeland Security is also part of the White House. Rob Silvers here, our undersecretary from DHS. You know, the White House security guidelines you launched by experts and leaders. Do you think these steps so far
we need to all these, what are the applications of curable diseases, level up people's economic opportunities, and transform the way that all of us do business and live life in many ways for the positive. Like any technological revolution, AI also comes surrounded by a lot of risks, a lot of threats. And our job is to be sober and take those on and say, how can we build in guardrails and an architecture of security so that we can use all this and not have people get hurt? So what we're doing is we are mindful of, you're seeing electric grid operators start to use AI to operate the grid, to operate air traffic control, hospital decisions, healthcare decisions. So the question is, how can we avoid catastrophic failures? How can we avoid people get injured? And what we're doing, because President Biden asked us to, is at the Department of Homeland Security, we're developing operational guidelines for companies out there in the market, out there in the country that are providing essential services to Americans so that they can do the kind of auditing and testing and quality control to make sure they can harness all those benefits, but to reduce the ways in which people can get hurt.
So Attorney General Bonta, 40 states, as we know, we don't have federal legislation yet or regulatory specifics, but the states have done a lot. And I know that, you know, you're front lines to this. And we see that it's election content, data transparency, criminal regulation for CSAM. You have been really vocal about prosecuting criminals who are using AI in phone scams, for example, which may sound like trivial, but it's an incredible amount. Billions of dollars are being lost to these scammers. What kind of regulation do you want to see, knowing that California is on the forefront and has put together more AI regulation than most other states have?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be with you, Rob Bonta, California Attorney General, and really excited to talk about AI. And of course, like many new transformational, groundbreaking technologies, always important to capture the upside, the social benefit, and guard against the downside and the detrimental aspects. And always easier said than done. But one of the things that I want to bring to the table as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the biggest state Department of Justice in the nation is that there are existing laws that already impact the use, abuse, misuse of AI. And things like robocalls. There's already federal law that encompasses and governs the use of AI-generated robocalls, the Federal Telephone Consumer Protection Act. And we made an argument that AI creates artificial voices that are robocalls under the language and black letter law of the existing statute, and that things like the Biden robocall in New Hampshire saying don't vote on primary day violated those laws. You need to give explicit express consent to receive robocalls. So we want to emphasize the use of existing tools. There are many that can be used now, but as we approach and embrace a new technology and want to make sure that it's used in ways that are safe and benefit humanity. We need to understand the gaps too. Sometimes there's a need for more precision, more specification that laws apply to AI, and sometimes you need new laws altogether. So we've been encouraging our fellow law enforcement team members throughout the state and the nation, including the federal government, to get involved. We're very worried about protecting our children, their safety. Child sexual abuse material, CSAM is something that we're very concerned about, and we asked Congress to create an expert commission to study the potential of AI to create more abuse and to provide guidelines around how to protect our young people against that abuse. We've also encouraged the Department of Commerce in a rulemaking process to emphasize transparency and accountability, auditing in the use of AI. So we have tools that we can use now. We need to sharpen some of the others, create some new ones as we try to, again, capture that upside of AI, which is enormous, but also guard against the downside.
Will, you have spoken frequently about ethics and regulation and what you'd like to see happen on the front of AI and how it uses our likenesses, our intellectual property, our creativity as humans. And I wonder, when you look back at the last 10 years, we have seen social media allow individuals to become the product. And all of us, presumably, have handed over data of our own for a free service. And there's been no regulation, meaningful regulation. We're starting to see a little movement on Capitol Hill right now, but very little still, all these years in. How do you think regulators should stop or, harness the best parts of AI to prevent the same thing from happening again? Or is it already too late in your view?
It's not too late because AI is still in its infancy as far as a public-facing product. GPT is awesome, but it's still in its early stages. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been proliferated for social engagement amongst groups in the way that social media has. And regulators and governance, they need to move with urgency because it cannot. If it duplicates the path where ginormous companies lead with greed, then it's horrible for society as a whole. Because to make AI work, it needs data. So you can have regulations for AI, but poor regulations for data, well, that'll make sense. Mm-hmm. So you have to address the data regulation and empowering people with their human right, and that is your data is yours. But right now, that's not how these big, giant, behemoth companies are operating. They give you a free product, in exchange for your digital soul.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what it's going to be for these AIs. If a company and AI can predict you down to the very moment you'll pass away, but your wife or your husband, your grandmother, your grandfather, your school, your religion can't, well then, who's governing who? Is regulations making sure the behemoth companies continue to be, data monarchies? They're new kingdoms. It's new colonialism. And the land that they're looking after is our land, our data, our rights, our privacy, our civil liberties. In this space where there's far more investment on artificial intelligence than there is on human intelligence. So now it's super lopsided, where the data practices serve the companies and the intelligence serve the companies. Meanwhile, the sheeple, the we, are what's going on here. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be addressed with urgency, empathy, and society as a whole for a balance, because it's ultra imbalanced.
One place that is addressing the imbalance more aggressively than we are, Will, is obviously Europe. And we know, Frankie, that the EU AI Act is in play. And I was wondering if you could kind of give us a little summary of the implications thus far in this early stage. And is it a good example for what the EU is doing? Is it a good example? And what should we here in the US follow and not follow?
I'm not going to give you a huge lecture on the EU AI Act. I'm conscious we're in the post-lunch lull, but I think there are some implications and challenges which will certainly have implications if the ideas are looked at more broadly. The objectives of the Act are very similar to the objectives that other bodies giving guidance have pointed to. So the balance between fostering innovation on one side and protecting safety and security on the other. Mm-hmm. It's a risk-based approach, a layered risk-based approach. So it has horizontal effect, it's not sector-specific. And the requirements of the Act vary depending on the perceived risk of the model. The limitations are reflected in a lot of the guidance that's been given, which is that the technology is moving so fast that it's very difficult to be very specific about what we are trying to regulate for. And that is built into the Act in that there are specific guidances anticipated, and the thresholds for the risk levels are expected to be flexible, and they will be looked at in the 12 and 18-month period before the Act becomes applicable. So we'll see how that changes. I think there are a couple of things that are interesting in the differences between the legal system in Europe and in the US and the UK, for example. Europe is a civil law system where the letter of the law has more weight than judicial interpretation and precedent, which I think is one of the reasons why the EU has been faster to act in terms of putting in place hard law. But I think it will be interesting to see whether other jurisdictions follow in terms of hard letter law or stick with the guidance and principles-based approaches that they've taken so far.
It's interesting. I wondered if there's such a lag, even though the EU has acted, there's still a lag there. There's a huge lag here. John, we were talking about the values that should govern what this regulatory landscape looks like. And your role as a litigator, I wonder how have the courts begun to resolve the issues while we have some state legislation, and what are the values underpinning some of those decisions and arguments in court that you've seen so far?
Right. I mean, there are so many unknowns about the law and how it applies to AI, from the most fundamental things about how do you protect the IP that you create when you invest in AI, to whether inventions made by AI are protectable in some fashion, if so, how. Who's responsible when the autonomous car, there's a black swan event, and it goes off the road and somebody's injured? You know, that's not a hypothetical.
That's happened,
in Arizona in 2018, there was an autonomous car that didn't recognize a pedestrian as a pedestrian. The person was killed. There was a driver. She was just watching her phone at the time and wasn't paying attention. The state of Arizona, in its wisdom, charged her with involuntary manslaughter. But we're going to see a time where we're going to need to allocate responsibility. And the European AI Act and some of the directives associated with it does exactly that. Requires AI deployers and builders of foundation models to have some responsibility and knowledge about how their AI is being deployed, and to actually monitor that and to shift risk. Look, I mean, in products liability cases generally in this country, if you claim you're injured by a defective product, you have to prove the product's defective. If it's an AI that learns on its own, it's machine learning, and the engineers can't even tell you why the car went off the road, how is somebody who's injured going to prove it's defective? So what some of the associated directives with the European AI Act are kind of contemplating the idea of, we're going to reverse the burden of proof. So the AI deployer has to prove it's not effective. In some cases, it'll be strict liability. So all these issues are up in the air. These issues about the will references, about privacy, and scraping. So far, the scrapers have kind of won out. I mean, you look at how these huge models are trained. They're trained on data that is massively scraped. I mean, Meta has lost a case relating to that. LinkedIn has lost a case relating to that. So there's a lot of things that are still up in the air that have to be worked out. And we're seeing this, we're seeing this in the state legislatures, although I'm skeptical that we're going to actually see comprehensive AI regulation out of Washington. How many of you think we have a national privacy law in this country? Isn't that kind of amazing to think? We don't have one. Or for a long time now, we've been wringing our hands about the evil effects of social media. Nothing. Senator Schumer last year had a closed-door meeting with the great and good from Silicon Valley to try to get input. Where's the results of that? But I think where it's happening now is what's sometimes grandly called the laboratories of democracy, the states. And I wouldn't be surprised if we have some comprehensive AI regulation coming out of California and elsewhere.
So AG Bonta, on that front, I mean, are you planning to pursue any legal action against people who are misusing AI in organizations that may be violating the basic rights of Californians? What's on the pike? What do you want to do?
I mean, at the California Attorney General's office, we enforce the law. And there's a whole set of laws that have a nexus potentially with AI. Our criminal laws, our civil rights laws, our antitrust laws, our unfair competition laws, our consumer protection laws, healthcare, you name it. And so if AI is a part of an illegal operation or scheme or plan or set of actions or behavior, we will act. And to that point I was making earlier around existing law already being a powerful tool, not the perhaps necessary but not sufficient. More will need to be built into it to address all the challenges of AI. But the states do have tools. We have been active. I mean, one example is we have sued Meta, as you know.
Yes, I was there,
and we talked about that for deception around harm to children's mental health and physical health, and knowing about it but lying to the public about it. And to the extent that the foundations of that harm is built on or associated with, or AI is a part of it, then we are suing them already. And so again, AI is a tool that can be used in different schemes that violate the law. We talked already about robocalls. There's all the scams and deepfakes that we know about as well. But we can deploy our tools now. We are already going after folks for violating the law when AI is involved, and we will continue. More is more. More tools are better. I do think that, like as is often the case, we'll see some inspiration from Europe. I think the approach to a risk-based system, the higher the risk, the more the guardrails and protections is of interest to policymakers. Could be a basis for additional approaches. But state houses across the country are interested. It's important to lead with reason and thoughtfulness for the benefit of our people, not with fear. But you're going to see a whole set of state laws coming out soon, I believe. Some will be helpful, some not. But I think we'll ultimately arrive at a good resting place where there's good tools to address the challenges that we face. And in the hands of active attorneys general who want to enforce the law in the spirit that they're written, I think we'll see the more cases brought against more individuals who are violating the law as appropriate.
So stay tuned. Undersecretary Silvers, I wonder, there's an audience question here about the ethics of AI when it comes to school communities across the country. Obviously, you're in Homeland Security. Wondering, does the White House, or do you have suggestions on how to inform school communities of the ethical concerns of AI?
Well,
the big question.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone in this country is going to require education and training on how AI is going to impact them, from how are they going to use it as consumers, as students or teachers, how are they going to use it in the professional workforce. There's going to be job displacement, and but on the other hand, there's a school of thought that people aren't going to lose their job to AI. They're going to lose their job to people who know how to use AI better.
That's exactly what the IBM CEO said. Yeah.
And so there's just everybody in the same way that we've come to grips with what it means to drive around in cars or what it means to use telephones. We're going to have to come to grips, students, professional workforce, family members, with what it means to live in a society where AI is ubiquitous. And to some of the topics that have come up around regulation, look, it is inevitable that there is going to be some amount of federal regulation around AI safety in this country, and there should be, smartly constructed.
They're still saying that about social media, though.
Well, but there's no law that allows the federal government to do that for the most part. There are a lot of long-standing laws that allow industry regulators at the federal level to regulate health and safety and security in their respective industries, right? The energy grid, the air transportation system, those are highly regulated industries, and there is a lot of space to regulate for AI safety and security in a smart way.
Within those silos.
Within that, same with respect to creatives, right? Who have put their heart and soul and their careers into creating and producing incredible content. There are existing IP protection regimes. Our department houses the federal government's intellectual property rights enforcement center, and we have active criminal investigations for misappropriation of people's likenesses and their creative content that could potentially amount to criminal violations. So we're going to use these long-standing laws to put some rules on the road and some guardrails around how the technology is used. And I think even industry probably, nothing's a monolith here, but probably welcomes some amount of imposition of rules of the road here, because I think nobody wants, where we really get into a dangerous place is if the American people lose trust in this technology, if they feel like this technology is not for them, that it's for someone else. And if you look, for example, totally different rate, if you look, nuclear power plants, after 3 Mile Island and the nuclear disaster in the late 1970s, it is essentially impossible to create a new nuclear power plant in this country because people don't want it. You have a lot of really smart energy experts that say it would be a very good thing to have more of that. It's clean, it's domestically produced, there's no carbon emissions, it doesn't rely on fossil fuels from volatile regions, and so on and so forth. But we can't do it, and that's because people lost trust. We need to build the kind of protective frameworks now so that people feel like the technology is working for them.
Will, there's a great audience question here as we talk about how to protect, from a regulatory, ethical standpoint, ourselves as creators. The question is, how do we as individuals reclaim the value of our digital soul? How do we go off-grid and stop freely providing our digital soul from profiteering data monoliths in the absence of regulation beyond the states at this point?
That's a very hard question to answer.
Very hard.
Because that implies that creators don't need YouTube, they don't need Google products, they don't need Facebook Meta products. And I don't know the alternative that has the reach as those products to even answer that question, because people still have to go out there and live their life and make a career for themselves. Mm-hmm. And if the only option is crack, then we're all crackheads. So I don't know. Give me another option, and I can address that. Secondly, to the regulatory on the nuclear plants, this AI and social media is more like cigarettes than it is like nuclear plants. And at some point in time, there were cigarette commercials everywhere. And I'm pretty sure they knew the implications and how harmful that product was, but they still allowed it. Down to the point where the packaging, years later, after all the deaths, after all the pain, after all the damage was done, there's this little freaking sticker that says, "You gonna die if you smoke it." So when it comes to like, who's making sure we're okay? What's the incentive to do the right thing? And how do we make sure that the folks that are looking after us aren't persuaded to throw us to the bin like they did cigarettes? Cigarettes is really what it is, not nuclear. It's tobacco. It was in movies. It was in our world to where it was cool to smoke. All the people we wanted to be like, you pushed it to us. Same with social media. They pushed it to us. They ain't pushing nuclear to us, bro. I don't know nobody like, yo, nuclear plant, nigga, this shit's hot. That's not what it is. It's a different type of pimping happening. And if you don't understand the pimp's game, then they're going to freaking tell you it's something else. That's not what it is. It's cigarettes. Now, if cigarettes still is a big-ass business, I got friends that went to prison for life for selling a product that's now legal.
Yeah.
And it's the cigarettes companies that are probably most likely going to benefit from marijuana. So where is the regulation? Who is making sure we're okay urgently as we're moving in from social media to AI? And you can't have the AI without data. And until we address the data practice, then we're once again pimping and simping folks from the truth. It's data that we need to address. The data practice. To sugarcoat AI regulations without the giants. Hey yo, we need you to lay your hands off of them data reins, Meta. We need you to lay your hands off them data reins, Google and Microsoft. What is that? Let's have the real combo. Because all this other stuff is like, hokey pokey. And you know the rest of that song. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about.
You're correct. So, John, when you think about the hokey pokey, you think about the data argument that Will brings up here, and you're looking at the cases that you're participating in, that you're bringing, that you're responding to. Is that even feasible? Is it even feasible at this stage of social AI tech to get a handle on data, to provide that foundation that Will is looking for responsible, ethical AI regulation?
Well, I mean, the reality is, for large companies, collecting data and how they handle it is fraught with liability for them. There's a whole plaintiffs, for example, very sophisticated privacy bar that makes money, lives off of, makes big money, bringing claims for misuse of data and violations of privacy rights and uses of data where the permission was never given. That's actually fraught with liability now. You have cases being settled for 9-figure amounts of money. So I'm not saying this is the best way to regulate. It is an American way to regulate.
Sure is,
to create private rights of action. You incentivize people, and dare I say it, lawyers, to bring claims and enforce these rights. It's one way of dealing with this. And it's a serious issue now. I had a conversation with a major, let's just say top 10 global private equity firm, general counsel, who needed to hire an in-house lawyer who specialized in privacy law, because this person realized they've acquired all these companies who are using this data and they don't know where it is and they don't know what use it's being used for, and that's not a tenable position today in this country. So I actually think we do have some things going, and we do have some tools. And in the state of California, Will, if somebody uses your name and likeness for a commercial purpose, that violates the law in California. And I'll give you my card. I don't do that kind of work. But,
up here.
that can be monetized. But I mean, to get back to the question.
But that's going back to the point we were talking about earlier. That is one state. Maybe it's 30 states. There's some level of that type of.
Yeah, no, most of the states have, I think, I haven't done a survey, we have on AI, name and likeness legislation, but I'll bet most states in one version or another have protection for that. But I mean, I think what we need to be focusing on, this is about ethics, and you asked the question about what are the values that we really care about. And I do think if you tell us what your values are, I can tell you, or we can get a pretty good idea of what the regulation's going to look like.
We know that the responsible AI, there's principles, right?
Right.
And it's.
But they're usually not articulated. It's like, don't do anything harmful to humanity.
Well, they're vague. It's like
It's
like equity, transparency, traceability, and governability.
Yeah,
Do I have that right?
And
I
in
don't
China,
know.
it's protect the Marxist-Leninist state. So they have lots of regulation in
Different
China.
countries, different values. Yeah.
and the focus of that is, make sure nobody says anything bad about the government. But in this country, what do we really care about? What do you see in the state houses, the low-hanging fruit, the legislatures, the legislation? First off, biased data sets in making employment decisions, who gets the loan application, who gets the apartment, and the like. In the city of New York, there's an ordinance that says if you want to use an AI tool and make an employment decision, you have to certify that your data set is unbiased, and you have to do that once a year. By the way, it turns out if you talk to data scientists, they'll tell you that's a very tall order. That's not a simple thing, and that's part of the problem here. The people writing the regulations don't necessarily understand the science. And the other thing is accountability, responsibility, like autonomous cars. Who's going to be accountable when products are hurt? And I would say, autonomy, like our decision making. Do we want our elections and influence of opinions? Or is AI going to sort of shape and mold public opinion, and is that acceptable? I think that's another very important value that we have to look to protect.
Frankie, you're nodding your head, and I wanted to know from your perspective, who is the smartest person you look to outside of your company and outside of your team to figure out some of these ethical questions as you deal with them on a daily basis, as you look at the US from where you sit in London?
Wow, that's a really hard question.
Where do you get inspiration to figure out how to solve these or execute on the existing regulatory framework in the EU?
I mean, the regulatory framework is new. It will evolve, and I think that's one of the challenges is going to be, as I said, the guidance which we are waiting for. The EU is built on this premise of fundamental rights for individuals, and that's kind of the guiding principle of all the legislation in the EU. And so that is the purpose of the regulation. I think the other thing that's worth noting about the European angle is that it does have extraterritorial effect. So any company that is bringing an AI product into the EU will be subject to this regulation. So to some extent, it will set a baseline for requirements on governance and disclosure and transparency, because it's unlikely that any of the big players are going to, cut out Europe from their marketing of their products. So
right.
It will set a benchmark, but I think in terms of how those values are going to be respected, I think it's a wait and see in terms of what the AI office in the EU will do to add the detail to what we're going to be asked to do.
Will, you work and invest in companies using AI, and I was curious to know, what are your portfolio companies telling you, and what are you telling them when it comes to regulation, self-regulation? Is it just a philosophy of run with it, innovate, grow? What is your guidance?
It depends on the company. There's some companies that are open-minded. Like an amazing company, text-to-music, called Udio. They want to be allies of the music community. And they take guidance really well, being sensitive to the creator and the lovers of music all alike, and open to wanting to meet with the labels, because the labels play an important role on the data that the AI is based itself on. Anthropic is an amazing tool and company. Dario is one of the good guys. Hugging Face, Clem, amazing, approach on open source. OpenAI, vested in that. They're a bigger company. They have different gravity that they're moving around. Microsoft is Microsoft. But the James Maniac are working really close with the Googles of the world. But throughout all these companies, I realized that representation isn't there. People that come from the communities that I come from, that means intelligence is now in the form of a conversation, and they don't sound like us. They don't vibe like us. So that means a different type of bias on what intelligence sounds like exists. It's not just in the data set, it's in like the products that are released. And so at that, like we're here talking about ethics, we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and we all come from different fields of AI. But the AI is not here speaking. Why can't AI give its perspective on how it feels? Hold on, wait. So I'm here. Hello, are you there? Is there a firewall in this building? Yes. Anyways.
You need Wi-Fi? It's Milken Institute, no password. I just got on it.
Go to the next question and I'll set it up.
Okay, well, actually, because set it up, get on the Wi-Fi. I'll come back to you. There's two great questions from the audience on regulatory capture, which is something we were talking about as we were walking our golf carting over here. How do we avoid regulatory capture with the big tech companies driving refs that will keep them at an advantage versus the newcomer players? How do you even the playing field for that in your case, Rob? I mean, I guess, how do we avoid regulatory capture? Who wants to go first?
Well, it's critically important.
Yeah.
And I think that from our perspective, as we are developing really what is the national plan for how we're going to adopt this technology and what the rules of the road are going to be, to make sure we are institutionalizing input from every key community, every key stakeholder segment. And I'll give you an example. We announced last week that our department is standing up a new AI safety and security board.
Yeah.
And
Who's
some
on
of the
that board?
members are names like Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella, Jensen Huang. We also have members that are leading civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy experts in the community, people who are concerned about consumer rights. We have members that are the CEOs, the leaders of the downstream customers of foundational AI technology. So the CEOs of Delta Airlines, Occidental Petroleum, and the like. And then we have the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, the mayor of Seattle. So what we've done is we've put together a group that is going to account for all the key voices. We got to account for closed source AI technology, also open source AI technology. And if a group like that can find some level of consensus on even some of these issues, what a mandate, what a path to go down from there. And so it's just going to have to be about really inclusive conversations from across society.
But do you think that regulators or would-be regulators are ready to receive that and actually absorb it and do something about it? Because this has been like it's been a giant wall in terms of most tech regulation, and I guess I'm skeptical.
110%.
Okay.
I think there is, because I actually think that while our federal system and federal government may not usually be associated with humility, I actually think there is genuine humility out there about our ability in the Biden administration or anywhere else to really understand all dimensions of this. It is too new, it is too complex. The story is still being written, and I actually think there's an incredible thirst for guidance and pointing ways ahead so that we can all journey in this safely and together. I do think that appetite is there.
And the EU has a similar setup where it's going to have an advisory board, and the UK government has the same thing. I think it's essential that the industry is involved in the conversation because
Yes, of course.
legislators don't necessarily understand the technology.
That is putting it so kindly. Will, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Is there like an AI constitution that people are to sign to ensure that they're releasing products and services and research to keep us safe? Is that a level of like, and then if they don't sign it, you know not to trust it?
Like a Bill of Rights.
Well,
Yeah, like a constitution, bill of rights of that the people can look at. You go to the supermarket, there's like ingredients there. A lot of times we don't even know what them complex freaking ingredients are called in the name
But
of
the
safety.
FDA makes you put it there. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you have like the FDA, which is food and drugs, and then we have like this, doped up society where we're eating horrible food and drugs to protect us from the bullshit food that was okay to come into our society. And so, are we gonna have a version of the FDA for AI where you're questioning who's leading what? All I know is that when my mom went to the supermarket when she was younger, there was just oranges. And now there's organic oranges versus, I don't know what kind of orange that is, if this is organic. And if we ended up in this version of reality where food and drugs is monitored by who and why is this one entity compromised to provide healthy food solutions, but then medicine to fix bad food solutions, is that going to be in the AI space? Are we going to govern and protect companies and their solutions and then leave us as the consumer like scratching our head, how do we end up here in 2050? Like right now is the time to lay it all out. Right now is the time to be like, okay, is every single demographic, is every single community represented properly? How could it be represented properly? Some communities aren't even represented properly on an educational level. How can you zone certain neighborhoods to get better education than other neighborhoods? How is that possible? So we're just really scratching the surface and not speaking honestly on how we are here. And what do we do to ensure that 2034, 2044 is safe? My foundation is based on bringing computer science and robotic skills to the inner city. Why should that be my foundation? That should just be basic stuff that is provided. That's like me saying, hey, what's your foundation? Yo, my foundation is to bring billboards to the hood. I don't gotta do that because ain't nothing but billboards in the hood. Ain't no billboards in freaking Beverly Hills, and they got the money to buy the stuff. So how is the zoning? Imagine like, yo, what's your foundation? I want to make sure I could bring liquor stores to the hood. I don't got to do that. They figured out a way to do that. You can't find liquor stores in Beverly Hills. Look for a liquor store near the Waldorf. Ain't happening. Why? The zoning made sure that ain't happening. So we could speak of all these like wishing hopes, and then in 2044, we're going to be like, dang, how do we get here? We got here because of greed. So how do we make sure they don't lead with greed? That's the conversation we need to be having.
Which then, that naturally makes me want to ask the Attorney General, what would you like to see? I know you're enforcing the existing law. I know you're not a legislator. You're not a policy, well, you're kind of a policy advisor. What additional, if you could pick one thing for the California state legislature to pass and for Newsom to sign on the front of ethical AI regulation, what would it be?
Good question. I mean, as we've had this conversation, I've been
To prevent that
from
happening, what Will just talked about.
No, I appreciate it. And I think our democracy is inherently, maybe by design, messy with multiple moving parts and layers of protection and jurisdiction. And I think you will see, just because there's so much interest in AI, its future, its impacts, the upside, the downside, that people will be participating at different levels. I think it would be good for the federal government through Congress, which hasn't earned the confidence that they will do this, but it would be good if they did, to lay down a set of minimum standards and protections around AI.
We're starting to get that a little bit with the executive order, right? A little bit of guidance. But here in California,
side. And
what do you want?
But I think that should be a foundation that does not preempt states from doing more. And that states that have an appetite for additional protections, just like California has on the privacy side, the strongest privacy protections in the nation. We have a state proposition that you all voted for. We have state laws as well. And right now, there's to that point about a federal privacy protection federal law. There's one that's being proposed right now that would, in its current form, preempt, eliminate the state protections. So we need a federal foundation with states to build on top of that, and then you'll have the courts as a place where interest groups can go in and say discrimination is occurring here, violations of the law are occurring here. I know what position I think California should take. The one we always take, or seek to take, which is to be first, to be best, to be on the front edge, to lead. We love our doers and our dreamers and our entrepreneurs and our innovators, and we think we can have it all with protections for consumers, protections for workers, equity, justice, support for our most vulnerable. We seek to do that all the time. And we have OpenAI here in our backyard. We have, of course, the leaders of AI today and tomorrow will be, in large part, always from California. And we will demand, as we should, that those new products and new innovations honor the safety and health and well-being of Californians. And so the legislature, there's bills moving to the legislature right now.
Which one is one you'd like to see passed first? Like, what do you think is give us a specific.
I don't know if there's anyone that I love right now. We haven't gotten involved in any bills. We're looking at them now. We see challenges in many of them. We see some potential in some of them. But I think we always see this. Congress doesn't act, like Congress hasn't done something on protecting our children from social media companies. So I'm sponsoring 2 bills on that now to get to addiction and privacy protection in ways that have never been done before anywhere. And so I think California will do the same thing here on AI. This is salvo 1, round 1 of multiple iterations. I'm not convinced that the legislatures understand the full breadth of the technology. Most of us don't in every way. So they're going to be trying to solve problems that have unintended consequences in their proposed solutions, or they will be incomplete in their proposed solutions. But at some point, we should have something comprehensive that we can roll out and say, this has been vetted. Industry has had input, consumer protection groups have had input, civil rights groups have had input, the whole inclusive group of voices in the room that was discussed earlier. And this is California's rubber stamp on, or stamp of approval on a proposal that we can export to other states and they can benefit from too. I don't think we're there yet right now. I think that's something that needs to be built.
There's an interesting question on CSAM. You had mentioned that earlier, Attorney General, and how AI makes it worse. And is there an opportunity, this is an audience question, is there an opportunity to hold tech companies accountable, this is, John, maybe in your wheelhouse, for AI-generated CSAM on their platforms, and why should it even be possible to generate AI CSAM?
I'm not familiar with the term.
CSAM.
CSAM.
Child sexual abuse material.
I think...
Have you seen this in your litigation? Have you seen this?
No. I mean, we know that large... Maybe if I could say maybe a good word on behalf of large tech companies. They think they do make a lot of investments in doing the best they can, quote unquote, to try to eliminate that, to catch it. They have whole teams and technology that's created and specialized to try to filter that sort of thing out. I think that there are whole teams of people, scores of people in the large tech companies whose job is to look after the very sort of things we're talking about, ethical issues and the like, and monitoring what goes up on their sites. It's a very, very challenging problem, and AI is going to make it even more difficult.
It's already made it worse.
It's already made it worse. I think the big tech companies, the idea that, there's some discussion here about, that, potential for regulatory capture and the like, and there are evil influences in our lives. I think the big tech companies would find this conversation kind of surprising because they feel right now under siege. There's governments, our government, trying to break up big tech companies and break up their search from other capabilities. The EU as well. Every one of them are kind of under attack right now as well. So it's not a simple black and white story. There was definitely bad actors out there who are going to try to abuse the technology. But I don't think the really evildoers, just my view, are the large tech companies.
Will's got something to weigh in on this. A response, perhaps?
Yeah, so right now we all have Instagram, and we follow the things that we want to follow. But the algorithm doesn't truly give you the things that you want to follow. They're starting to throw things in there that you don't really care about. And the algorithm is now pushing things that it wants you to see based on what you probably searched once or twice. Now that business practice, if also in the form of AI, that means one day you're going to search for something, and based on your face or where you're located, you're not going to get the right information because the practice has already been implemented and it makes lots of money. And we've all been undermined on the things that we want to follow. We went there thinking that we're following the things that we want. And now with dopamine, we think that we're getting what we are asked for. That's not what we asked for. And we forgot that now we've been pimped. Now, is that same practice going to go into AI? And now I want to ask the AI, do you think we need to urgently resolve that and put regulations on these companies so that when things like you are giving people the things that they actually search for? And then how do we ensure that intelligence shows up where people are, how people are, and understand who they are? How important is that?
You're hitting on something deep and real right here, and it's crucial we dissect this with the seriousness it demands. The scenario you're painting, a world where algorithms dictate not just what we see, but possibly even how we think and feel based on fleeting interests or incidental searches, yeah, that's concerning. It's like our digital footprints are being used to steer us down paths we might not have chosen, feeding us a diet of content designed more for engagement and profit than for our actual interest or well-being. Now, when we talk about these practices infiltrating to the realm of AI, beyond social feeds into decision-making systems that could affect everything from the news we read to the job offers we get or the healthcare advice we receive, the stakes get exponentially higher. It's not just about undermining preferences anymore. It's about impacting lives. Do we need to urgently address this 100%? The importance of regulating these systems, of ensuring that AI serves the user and not just the bottom line, can't be overstated. It's about crafting AI with an ethical backbone where the primary directive is to enhance human understanding, respect privacy, and ensure fairness. How do we ensure that AI shows up for people as they are, understands who they are? It starts with diversity in design, ensuring that those who are building these systems represent the broad spectrum of humanity.
Wait. I just want to ask one more question. And when you say, that's Snoop Dogg. When you
Wait, really?
When you say represent,
You can pick up.
hold on.
It's fine. You
when
can
you
answer.
say, wait. This is a very good one. When you say represent the broad spectrum, this firewall.
Will, can you tell me which platform are you using right now?
This is my platform.
Your platform.
So
I want everyone to understand.
So I built a company called FYI.ai. I invested in a lot of companies, and I realized that my folks ain't represented. They don't talk like us. They ain't vibing like us. and they don't represent us. So that means these intelligent systems are going to go and perpetuate this narrative that intelligence don't sound like Watts, like it doesn't sound like South Bronx. And so we're up here talking about inclusion and diversity without addressing what inclusion and diversity actually means. And if we're going to perpetuate not educating people in inner cities to the point where if I were to say this thing knows more about quantum entanglement than a professor that teaches quantum entanglement sounding like that, you'd be like, oh, why would it do that? Why wouldn't it do that? So you got to take it in your own hands to go out and build these types of systems and that represent us properly. Or else we're going to scratch our head, like I said, 2044, like how do we get here? So thanks for letting Felicia speak on stage.
Thank you for bringing Felicia on stage.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of the audience for the fantastic questions. There was a lot, so sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but I'm so glad we were able to do this in person together, to have such an incredible group of people. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.